All right. So, podcast time with me, yours truly, Edward Reyes, and my brother, Ethan.
Reyes.
Yep, there he is. Because he agreed to help me. I definitely didn't force him. Anyways, so we're discussing kind of like what I learned this entire semester in AM 101. And, well, it's a lot. I will say that. Let me just bring up my notes. Let me see. I'll bring up perusal as well. One moment. It's just loading. All right. So, I guess, so the whole point of this is I kind of like just, kind of like saying what I learned throughout this entire semester. And I kind of want to relate it back to my major, which is game design, which is kind of an odd major to kind of relate this stuff back to. But over the course of the semester, I think I've actually been thinking about it, and ever since we got, we were told about this assignment, I've been kind of trying to wrap my head around how what we learned can kind of relate into game design, for me at least. You're not in game design, you're in graphic design. But maybe adding a few things from how it can relate into graphic design, can give a little bit of insight, it can go back and forth. I think that'd be a little helpful, So I guess we can start off we can start off with the first module. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then, So, I let's start with Milanowski. Yeah, I like that reading a little bit more. Let me just bring it up here and. Trying to do this on my phone because my computer didn't want me doing this stuff for whatever odd reason. Okay, so Milanowski, we start off with this guy, Milanowski, who studies different kind of cultures, right? I believe it was he was studying in Papua New Guinea, and his whole entire thing was, he was like super excited to be, studying these people in Papua New Guinea. So, and his kind of like his philosophy, I think, behind it was more or less that when researching different cultures, like you have to, you're going into it basically not kind of knowing much about them. I mean, you gather information about them, but you're not really, you're not there. Like, you're not those people, right?
Right.
And their culture can be like way different from yours, you and I's, right? Cultures around the world are going to be different, way different. People treat family differently. People treat relationships differently. People treat how you act, how you eat differently in different cultures. It's something that it's something that everyone kind of gets used to. They kind of get used to their own culture, and then kind of when they get exposed to a different culture, it's always the kind of reaction. Especially, at least for me, it's like, oh, that's different. So going back to him, so he was kind of really excited to learn about this new culture, and he had this mindset that if you're going to learn about this culture, you kind of need to listen to those people, more or less, right? I mean, you're going to have scientists and different kinds of different kinds of people saying things about this culture, but they've never really, actually been in that culture, but they're going to say stuff about it, and they're going to have written text about it, and they're going to have studies about it, right? And you're going to go into that with like that kind of base knowledge, and some of it might be contradictory when you're actually talking to those people. He said, even if, your ideas are kind of contradictory to theirs, you shouldn't, like interrupt them or try to correct them in any way, because, getting it from them raw, like just like their raw, like explanation of their culture is what their culture is, right? You're literally getting it from the source. And I think that's super important when you discuss different cultures around the world. It's one thing to read about, say, we're Peruvian. So it's one thing if someone reads about Peruvian culture in a book rather than actually being there and being with a Peruvian family when they're eating, at dinner or whatever, right? It's going to be different. Yes. You can read about it, but when it comes down to it, when you're actually there, that's when you're going to learn the most about the culture.
Yes.
Like part of our culture when we went down, I mean, I know we were young, but I can still remember I was 14. Potatoes in Peru are like
800 different types of potatoes.
Yeah. Over 800 different kinds of potatoes in Peru. Now that might be like something that you pass off as a fun fact, but in fact, it's super important because that's agriculture. Farmers in Peru growing different kinds of potatoes. That's what they mainly eat. No, it's not what they mainly eat, but it's a big part of their diet, right?
Yes.
And you kind of wouldn't really understand that unless you were kind of like there and you were served it. I remember we were sitting there and we got served these. They're very long, almost like string bean-esque. They look like
They look like cactuses.
Yeah, right. But they were potatoes.
Yes.
And it was such a big deal when Abi brought them over. My grandfather. He's trying to show us everything, and I think we kind of take it for granted. We're just as kids, we're just like the potatoes, whatever. But
you don't have those potatoes here.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have them here.
United States, and it's very different. And
yeah, like you have to like understand like something like Dad going from there where you can find every potato under the sun. Versus coming here and you go to a supermarket and you have three. Exactly. Right? That's a big cultural thing, I think. In my mind, that's how I see it. It's and I think Milanowski being as excited as he was in that reading, granted, I think, learning about different cultures is a cool thing. But when he says, you actually have to listen to them and see what they're all about, it's, it is in a way invasive, I guess, when these people go and they insert themselves into these families to just study how the culture works. It's a bit invasive, right? Would you say that's a bit invasive?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Invasive of personal privacy.
But that's probably how you're going to get the best information. I mean, otherwise you're going to be misrepresenting this culture, right?
Yeah.
If you just make up things that you think sound right about the culture, it's misrepresentation.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I think Milanowski, he was more about like respect, right? It's a respect. Yes. Like he's inserting himself into this research, but also he's doing it out of respect for that culture to get it right. And I think that's a big, and I want to say, I think that's a big thing in video games, especially when you're trying, like, you have different video games that, of course, you have, like, sci-fi shooters and everything. It's not taking place in a real, actual scenario. But sometimes you have games that want to represent different parts of the world, right? We have, I remember when I was a kid on my PlayStation 3, we playing Assassin's Creed, and that takes place in Renaissance...
Italy.
Yeah, was it Italy?
Yes, it was Italy.
Yeah, Renaissance Italy. Right? And that was cool. And they had to do a lot of research because every landmark that you got to see within that game had history to it. And you could actually go up to it and actually read an entire thing, like almost like a Wikipedia page they had typed up for every famous landmark that they included in that game. You could just go up to it in game. You didn't have to. It was optional. And you could read about that landmark and the history behind it and everything. right? And it was kind of cool because it almost felt like you're playing a video game, but you're also getting a history lesson, you know.
Yeah.
But they had to do research into what culture was like then, you know, what kind of, you know, what the people were doing at that time, what society was like at that time, you know, what market sellers were selling, what the kind of attitude was towards politics and everything. It was all in that game.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
There was cool history and very, I would say, accurate about the landmarks. Obviously, you know, Assassin's Creed takes it up a notch, and obviously there weren't assassins back then running around rooftops.
No, of course not.
But like the landmarks themselves were pretty accurate.
Yeah, right. Well, actually, very accurate. I mean, they were in game, but the information about them that you could read about them in game was very accurate. You know, I took a look back, and yeah, they're actually very accurate. I always thought maybe they just pulled it off a Wikipedia page. I tried looking, they didn't. They actually wrote up their entire,
Yes.
like the entire information about it, which is cool. So, coming to terms with that, like in video games, you don't want to disrespect culture.
No.
Exactly. When it comes down to like, you know, and I think even it doesn't even have to do with like certain cultures in particular. You can even, as a game developer, you have ideas, you can make cultures, right? And designing those cultures, you know, you're going to take, you know, inspiration from certain things. There are a lot of games that take inspiration, take different cultures and kind of incorporate them into these like subgenres, like I'm blanking on the name. Between Good and Evil, I think it was. It's a Ubisoft game.
Oh,
again.
I know you do have Good and Evil. Beyond Good and Evil.
Beyond Good and Evil, right? Yeah, Beyond Good and Evil. That takes place way in the future, but it uses a lot of Hindu culture and like religion and stuff like that in its game, right?
Yes.
It really pulls off the art and the religion and like you look at Hindu culture and you look at that game and you're like, oh, I see the similarities of what they're trying to go for. It's not straight Hindu culture, but there's a lot of aspects of it going into that. And I think in one way to keep it like what Milanowski does, you know, what he's into is more like just being very respectful about it. I think game developers, when creating these games, have to be very respectful about what they're actually like.
Of the culture that they're going to represent.
Exactly, right?
Especially AAA games, the games that are the most popular.
Well, yeah, those have the most eyes.
Culture, and you get it wrong, all of a sudden you're disrespecting that culture.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where I'm. Yeah, that's where my mindset is right now. That's where I kind of relate it. Is Milanowski has this like idea that, you know, you need to be respectful and everything. And just from the comments, you know, that we had on the reading, everyone kind of seems to have like saw that. You know, they see how respectful he is when, you know, doing his research. You know, they see his ideas of how you need to kind of like actually be there with those people to get the real essence of culture, you know, what they're all about. You know, you can't just kind of do it from a bird's eye view and call it a day. You actually need to be there and experience it for yourself. Yeah. And then share that research with the world.
Yes.
That's the final goal. And just like how a game developer develops a game, to show it to the world, you know, and not be disrespectful in any way. And if they are, you know, that's learning. That's a definite learning experience. There's a few choice games we could probably think of that maybe doesn't represent a certain culture. Great, but we won't get into that yet. Okay. We'll save that because, you know, in the industry, I think there have been blunders. Yeah, that's a good word. There have definitely been blunders. But all right. So that was Milanowski. I think his reading I definitely enjoyed a lot, just because he kind of shares that same kind of attitude I have towards it, you know, and I think a lot of people have that same attitude towards it. So it's very relatable, and I did like that reading. So then we're just going to jump to Should we do Baldwin and Mead, or should we do Benedict and let's do Baldwin and Mead. I really liked the Baldwin and Mead. They did a interview podcast, kind of like what we're doing too. It's one-on-one, where they kind of just discussed matters of. They discussed matters of like the roots of racism and stuff like that, and racism today. Well, there today was all the way back then, but in that society at that time and the future, right? And they go into full length about it. Baldwin, Alec Baldwin, his voice is fantastic, I will say. It was great hearing him. He has a lot of strong points, and I think he actually got very strong with me towards the end of it, where she started to give him a bit of a hard time about some of his ideas, and he kind of like shot her down a lot and told her, kind of told her off, saying, just kind of like speaking his piece, basically, and not letting someone else like put words in his mouth. I think there was a few times he actually said that she was putting words in his mouth, and he did call her out for it, and that was kind of interesting to see within the recording. But so they talk about racism, right?
Yes.
And one of the big ideas that I got from that, which I did comment on and it stuck with me, was the idea of the new generation. There's a lot of pointing blame nowadays at racism, right?
Yes.
A lot of people point at certain, like say, this does happen. A lot of people point at white people and kind of blame them for, the horrible stuff that went down with slavery back in, the 1700s and 1800s. That stuff, is still a really hot iron today, right? It's still like it still burns today, right?
Yeah.
It's still a wound that's, it hasn't been sewn yet. And, there's a lot of pointing fingers, right? And I think one of the big ideas with this is that, does this new generation, right, of people, are they responsible? Do they carry the responsibility of their ancestors who did those terrible things? Are they supposed to carry that responsibility? Or is it should their responsibility be to make a better future where we kind of leave that awful past behind us and make a world that everyone is like kind of, equal?
Yeah.
Right? That's the kind of question Alec Baldwin and Mead brought up. They talk about this thing. They talk about guilt, right? And they talk about having this kind of like useful guilt, in a sense, right? How I explain it is, the new generation feeling guilty for what their ancestors did, right? So they carry this guilt, right? When I say they carry a responsibility, I should have said they carry this guilt with them from their past, right? Mm-hmm. And the idea is that they really shouldn't carry the guilt, but they should use that guilt to kind of like make it a basis for how they kind of move forward in the future. How we as people kind of like make this world a better place through our actions, right?
Yeah.
And not focus on what had happened all the way back then in our families, or anyone else's family. We don't know. There could have been, there are people out there whose past ancestors owned a slave plantation. Is the child that is born now in the 2000s responsible for what their great grandfather was doing all the way back then? Should he feel responsible for what his grandfather was doing, what his great again, grandfather was doing, right? Should he? Or should it be his responsibility to make this world, better? Right? At least try to.
Yeah,
Not.
I understand.
And when I mean try, I don't want to say like, oh, it should be like he has to do it, right? Because of that. No, it's more of like not pushing it aside and saying it's not a problem, rather acknowledging it. Because the best thing you can do really is if you acknowledge it, right? Then more people are going to acknowledge it. More people are not going to kind of brush it under the rug, and then it becomes a talking point. And then we see change, right? We see change for the better, I'd say. And I mean, there was a bunch of other stuff that they discussed from, how the roots of skin color and the prejudice against certain skin color is formed and stuff. They talk about light and dark, why white is seen the way it is and why black is seen the way it is. It goes into a bunch of, also, Mead talks about a lot of like human nature kind of stuff, while Alec Baldwin kind of like tries to incorporate more of the, we're kind of like we're a more advanced people now. We have a higher understanding of this stuff. We're not cavemen anymore. We understand, and we can learn. Like those people, they were learning. We've come past that now, right? So there was a bunch of other stuff, and I think in terms of like race and equality between everyone, not just black and white, but any race really, I want to say that's like a really, really big part now, in game design. We see a lot more incorporation of different cultures and races being represented in video games.
None of them are being represented the right way.
Well, what I'm saying is like, let's take Rainbow Six Siege as an example. Okay, Rainbow Six Siege is a tactical shooter, but it's based around different countries and their special forces, right? So you get characters that are based around a country's special forces, right? And you get countries from around the world, not just the United States, United Kingdom. Those are in there. United Kingdom, Russia, France, but you also get, most recently Peru got its own operator.
Yes.
You got one from Mexico. There's one from Nepal. There is.
I'm sure there's one from Singapore.
There is another one from Singapore. As the game progresses, they're adding more and more. Yeah, more and more people, operatives, to this game from around the world, right? Mm-hmm. Which I feel is something that not a lot of games were doing back then. No. Think of Call of Duty.
Yeah, Call of Duty.
Think of Call of Duty.
2000.
Yeah, early 2000 Call of Duty, just one culture. United States, U.S. Marines. That was it.
And you had like one guy from like Britain.
Yeah, right? That was it. All white. Right? I'm pretty sure it wasn't until Modern Warfare 2 that there was actually a few black playable characters.
Yeah.
That you could play in like multiplayer. But even then, it wasn't like they were like main characters. It was just like you could be a black character. That was it. No Chinese. No Indian. No Korean, Mexican, Argentinian, nothing. Right? Just white and one black guy. Right? And as now in 2022, I see there's a lot more games that include
and they acknowledge
that there are a lot of people in this world that love to play video games, and they want to be they want to represent those people.
They want to be play as those characters that also represent their culture.
Exactly, right? And their race.
Yeah, it's,
I can think of a bunch. You know, Apex Legends. You know, you have characters, all different kinds of backgrounds, even in sexuality, right? Fortnite, Overwatch. You know, again, we're talking about Rainbow Six Siege, Call of Duty now. Call of Duty has actually grown a lot since the early 2000s, I think. They're not like as spread out as, say, a game like Overwatch or Apex, but I mean, they are better
than they were.
One of the
I'm pretty sure Call of Duty, when they remastered some of their old games, made sure to add that equality when they
did
remaster old games.
Yep, they did. It's a subtle thing, and not something that anyone had any problem with. No, but it's something that
something that's subtle that you.
Yeah, but it does but it does mean that they acknowledge it.
That they acknowledge they went back to a game where they didn't have a like this diverse cast of characters, and they went back and added that in.
Yeah, without and no one really noticed, but it's there.
It's there.
Yeah,
it's a representation.
Yeah,
on the left.
Yeah, and it shows that we're learning, and that's the big thing. I think Alec Baldwin kind of explains. We're a learning society, right? And we should learn how to look at our past and say, that's bad. That was bad, right? But not to dwell on it, but to say, all right, well, as youth of this...
How can we be better?
As the new generation, how can we be better, right? And I think we see that in video games.
Yes.
Especially in AAA now, because they're becoming more inclusive, a lot more inclusive. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. And it just kind of pushes that idea that, this is normal. That's the whole idea. It's like, this is normal.
Yes.
Right? We want this to be normal. And it almost feels like now, if you have a game where it's just all, white-skinned males shooting each other, it almost feels weird, right? Yes. If you were to play a game like a beta or something, and all the characters were just white-skinned males with maybe just different faces, it would kind of feel weird.
Yeah, it would. Even though it'd feel weird, but it's funny because not that long ago when Call of Duty World at War came out, obviously you had your Americans and Russians, and everybody was white. Everybody had, everybody was just white males.
Yep.
And that wasn't that long ago. What was that, 2008, 9?
It might have been
7.
Might have been 8. Yeah, 2008. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing that as a kid. I'm sure going back now, I'd probably notice that. Yeah, well, this is.
Well, yeah, because like every main character, there's not a think about it. If you think about the character, if you think about the characters of if you think about the characters from Black Ops, the original Black Ops, think about it.
Yeah, they were.
How many colored characters are there that actually had a name and actually had a part in the story? I can only think of one, and it wasn't even in Black Ops. It was in Modern Warfare. It was Ramirez.
Yes,
he was the only black character that had a name that was important to the story for maybe 2 missions.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, other than that, it was very white characters.
Yeah. So, but now, like games with like Overwatch and stuff, we have Symmetra. She's got
Farah Egyptian.
You
don't see that typically in video games.
No. We have Doomfist. Nigerian. Yep. We have Baptiste, who's Haitian.
Yes. You have and of course you have your white characters like USA Soldier and Britain Tracer. But you have these characters like Ana, Farah, both Egyptian characters. You have Genji, who's Japanese.
And Hanzo.
Who's Japanese. Even though characters that are robots, I mean, like Orisa is a robot, but she's from Nigeria. Therefore, she is Nigerian.
Yeah.
She has a Nigerian.
She holds that accent.
Yes.
And she has that culture. And her the way she's designed.
She has almost like writing. Not
writing. Like art. But it's art.
It is cultural art.
On her. Which is cool.
Yes, that is cool.
And it's cool to see, I think.
Doomfist has he has like these patterns on him. He has this clothing that's very traditional almost to his culture. and even when they do event skins, they have
Yeah.
things relating back to culture, skins that relate back to culture, voice lines. They have slang that they use in their cultures. I think, well, obviously, Roadhog, Junkrat, both Australians, they have their sayings that they do that you typically only hear in Australia.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so it's very inclusive. So yeah, I guess to kind of sum this up and not spend too much time on it, to kind of like get to it, it's overall the whole idea during that interview from Alec Baldwin and Mead was that like kind of they go into discussing why Mead thinks that there's racism today, and you had Alec Baldwin, at first he was actually telling some jokes and stuff, and some of his jokes were actually pretty funny. I did enjoy it, but he overall was kind of trying to say, like we can't keep, we can think about the past and kind of use that for a basis of a better future, and I think nowadays we are seeing that change. Granted, in some areas it's slow, but I think that change is happening, but I don't think that just because we see it happening means we can kind of lay back and say, yeah, it's taking its course. I think that's more of a reason for people to go out and kind of keep going, keep pushing it,
because eventually it's going to become normal.
Yeah. And I think, and hopefully we can achieve that someday. I mean, I don't know if racism will ever be, abolished. I'm not sure if it was Mead who said that maybe racism is kind of like a natural thing almost, but
it's probably not a natural thing, but it probably relates back to a form of judgment, which is in human nature.
Yeah, human nature. That's what I was saying. I was trying to get at it. You had better wording. Relating back to like human nature, but again, human nature has evolved, right? We've evolved as humans.
Yes, we're smarter.
Exactly. So we can get past this, right? It's an issue that we can definitely get past, I believe. All right, I'm gonna cut the recording here. This will be segment 1. And then we'll pick it up again with segment 2. All right. So this is part 2, section 2. We're getting into like Marx and Engels now. And just to preface this, because you weren't obviously in the class, just to give you a little backstory. So Marx and Engels, Communist Manifesto. I'm sure you learned about that in high school, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But the topic that I want to discuss surrounding them was this idea of class, not classiness, but social class in terms of like wealth, right?
Yes.
We're going to talk about the wealthy and the poor, the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, right? Stuff like that, which I think, the more you think about it, it's definitely a topic that you kind of think about, especially with, we grew up in a somewhat wealthy town, Madison. We got a lot of beachfront property here, right? But we don't live on the beach. We live in North Madison, woodsy area towards Durham. We're not the wealthiest, right? We do have money, but I mean, we're not like, you do know when we were back in high school, you get the kids with their first cars being a Lexus, an Audi, a Hummer, Land Rover.
The Hummer was hilarious.
Yeah.
They get the beefed out Hummer.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. All the tricked out Hummer. Yeah. Right. that, and here's the thing. All right. When we're talking about class, I want to kind of keep to it. We can bring up examples of games that maybe there was this kind of class divide, and why it was kind of a hard thing. And we can, and I want to kind of relate it back to the emphasis on communism by, through Marx and Engels' eyes. I think their idea, I don't think was, I think a lot of people hear Communist Manifesto and communism and they think, oh, you're trying to, change this world into being communist. It's like, well, if you kind of read into it, it's more of Marx and Engels kind of like explaining why, why they think first off, they actually complimented how America worked. Our
Capitalism?
yeah,
Like the system.
yeah, the system. They complimented how the system worked, but they kind of go on to explain how the next step after this is communism and why that should be accepted. And then, if I remember from class, Professor, you explained it very well. I didn't write it down. That was my fault. But it kind of arcs back, and there's like this kind of steps to these kind of systems where it kind of leads to where we are now, and then communism is after, and then it resets.
Yeah,
and we kind of like turn the page in history, as they say, right? Then it resets, and then we build up again from like trading, from going from like a system where you trade goods to then you buying goods to then you trading and buying goods to then everyone's getting those goods to then flipping the page, we're resetting back, right? That's kind of where they went. But let's first talk about class divide. I think that's a big thing nowadays too. Still a very prevalent thing. With all these multi-billionaires, Amazon, Tesla, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, all these kind of like billionaires, mega billionaires that, seemingly have started, buying everything. Just recently with Elon Musk buying Twitter. That was a big thing.
Big companies buying game companies.
Yeah, and we're going to get right into that. So, we can talk about both sides of this. Within games and with gaming companies. Let's start within games. All right. Class divide is a topic that is explored in a bunch of games.
Yes.
Yeah. What's one that you can think of?
One of my favorites, not so much class, a little bit of class divide, but I would say BioShock.
Okay.
In its way of, BioShock isn't much of, it's a game, but a lot of it is a criticism on capitalism and divide in classes.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that. My example was going to be Dishonored, both made by the same company.
Same company, yeah.
Same studio.
Awesome game studio.
But let's talk about BioShock, because that's a big one. All right. So BioShock, the whole premise is, and it actually pulls off of Ayn Rand's kind of philosophy, this whole idea of rapture.
Rapture, yeah.
Rapture being this city underwater where only the mega rich can stay. And they are separated from the entire world.
It's like a utopia.
It's not a utopia. They actually, it's like their own, they become their own thing.
Yeah.
So their rules of the land do not apply down in Rapture.
Yes.
They make their own rules, right? They have their own system. They're ruled by one dude.
The man who made it.
Yeah, the guy who put it all together, right? And it's just a place where the wealthy can live out their life underwater in this lavish skyscrapers.
Very Art Deco.
Very Art Deco. Stuck in the whole vibe was like early
1900s.
Exactly.
Gold
old antique
and red carpets.
And red velvet.
Yeah, red velvet and leather.
Stone claw tubs, stone claw couches. But anyways, so very pretty game, very great game. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about how they kind of portray what happened down in Rapture, right? Fitting enough, Rapture. That's the name of the city. We kind of we don't ever get to, we get to see what Rapture was like
in flashbacks,
but we actually get to see the downfall of that entire thing. Why it never worked. Again, you say the whole game is a criticism, right?
Yeah.
And it shows that by showing Rapture as an utter failure and the people within it becoming these junkies, grotesque monsters that just live off drugs and they're deformed and all this stuff, right? The lavish being tarnished. Exactly. Yeah, like set so far down,
like a fall from grace.
A fall from grace, yeah, from being this lavish, very rich person to going down this horrible like drug-ridden like psychomaniac path. And that's what the enemies are in the game. Are what we're supposed to. Yeah, the Brute Splicers and everything are once supposedly those rich people that have just turned crazy from drugs, right? So we get to see why this is all kind of goes downhill. You gotta uncover all of this stuff about, costs of everything, and the willingness of people to kind of respect their environment around where they are, because the city's underwater. There's not much you can do when a window breaks, right? I mean, there's some leaks and everything. You can't, and the people, they're smoking and they're, goofing around. They're getting drunk. They're breaking things. All of that is 10 times worse underwater.
Yes, when you're hyper pressurized.
Yeah, and everything. You gotta have. Yeah, exactly. And one thing, they kind of, it's a subtle nod, but it does show the class difference. There's the lavish, rich people who live out their lives in just paradise in Rapture. But then you wonder, well, who's taking care of everything? Right?
Yes.
That's where the character of what's called a Big Daddy, funny enough, is present. And these Big Daddies are supposed to be...
they're workers.
They're workers. But they're workers that are brainwashed. They're literally, they are modified.
They were
lower
class.
They were lower class people.
They were also prisoners.
Anyone who, they kind of just sold their life.
Disposable,
yeah, exactly. And it's said that these people who are in these diver suits that are called Big Daddies, these diver suits, they kind of sold their life. They sold their life away. And so they're taken down to Rapture. And they're modified. Their brains are hardwired, brainwashed. Their
bodies are molded.
Their bodies, are molded to these suits.
That are made to withstand high pressure so they can walk out in the open sea, repairing the city.
Yep, repairing the city as it needs it.
Yes.
And they also walk around inside.
They walk around inside, but they're big and heavy. They are just...
They're mindless.
They're mindless.
They're mindless brutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all they're for.
Obviously,
and that's where I think you see that kind of class divide. You're seeing, all these lavish people
are living in this big city
that's built up by these very unfortunately poor souls, right? And that kind of speaks volumes to what a lot of people see nowadays. A lot of people saying, it's the working class that built up this, America. It's a working class that built this country, right? Not the rich people that just sat aside and let the world build itself, No,
they got a nice wave.
Yeah, they rode the wave. But it's the working class that kind of built what we have now.
Yeah.
The roads, the buildings, the houses, everything. It was the working class. They did that, right?
Yeah.
So, we have that example, right? We have BioShock's a fantastic game, and I think it does a really good job of showing that class difference. Another game that I brought up was Dishonored, made by the same company. It kind of has the same premise, a little bit. Dishonored takes place in a fictional world, fictional England. Where we kind of never left the industrial age,
the Gilded Age of just hyper rich and mega poor.
Yeah, we never left that, right? So it only got worse, right? Yes. So in the game, the locations you're in, the backdrops that you're shown, the world that you explore is full of these very stark contrasts between rich and really poor,
Yeah.
right? And it's defined by actually a color scheme. Rich being this very white marble.
Yeah, white marble.
Just white marble.
You go inside and it's very
beautiful,
colorful.
beautiful architecture and everything. And then the game actually just puts it right in the middle of these slums. Right below it. Right in the gutter.
Grayscale.
Very grayscale. Yeah. Grungy browns, dark greens, and just like disease ridden.
In the
underground.
They make a point, there's obviously the rats are a big part of the game.
Yep, big rats, yep.
Rats.
Yep.
Going around everywhere. Crows.
Disease,
people who were sick.
Yep. There's actually a plague that actually is happening in the game.
Yeah.
That's why you see
at the start of the game they're throwing bodies
into mounds.
Yeah.
That they bodies that assumingly died to the plague that they don't know what to do with, so they just throw them in mounds. Very like Renaissance kind of vibe in a way. They're not really dealing with it in a sanitary way. They're just kind of piling bodies. But all that's part of the game's atmosphere. So we can say like why choose that kind of way to portray the game? Could have been portrayed in just that rich area, never showing the slums. Well, what does the developer accomplish by including that into the game? What does it show? Is it a criticism?
I guess.
Is it a form of expression through criticism?
I guess, yeah. A form. It is more criticism, I'd say. But it's also a way of I think it's a perspective.
Okay.
Obviously, how someone else sees it, it's freedom of expression as an artist.
We could say games is a form of art.
Games are a form of art and entertainment. Obviously, freedom of expression through art or any means. I think that the developer himself does a very good job of showing that contrast between the rich and the poor. And you're kind of like this character who's in between. You yourself aren't really affected.
No.
By either side.
No, in both games.
In both games, you really aren't. Well, I mean, I guess Rapture is more of a critique of the aftermath, the fall, but you're kind of living in it, in Dishonored.
Yeah, in Dishonored, you're actually living in it, yeah.
You're living in it as it's crumbling.
It's somewhat crumbling. It's almost like it's not, though. Because, like, the whole part of the game is you're, like, a bodyguard for this prime minister who has a daughter, and the prime minister who's going to make change for the people of the slums to make a better world gets assassinated because for political reasons, and you're blamed. Hence the name Dishonored. Dishonored. And so the whole game is.
And so you bring down this hyper corrupt
government
by going and basically killing like politicians and rulers and
in a fictional world.
In a fictional world, obviously. I think that it's kind of more of an extreme way to portray and criticize society, and I guess capitalism again.
Yeah. The rich only getting richer and the poor only getting poorer, right?
Yeah.
The whole criticism, capitalism, I guess. And so when we kind of relate that to how Marx and Engels kind of like talks about communism, I don't want to speculate whether in these worlds would communism have stopped the fall of Rapture, and would communism have stopped the assassination of that prime minister within Dishonored. I don't want to think about that nor speculate because that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But if we look at what the Communist Manifesto was or is, would it be a criticism itself of the system that we have? I mean, they do praise it. Or not praise it, but they do acknowledge what our system is now.
They do acknowledge and compliment.
I think they compliment. But it's hard. I think just kind of relating it to video games. We could just say, in video games, there are video games like Call of Duty where you're taught that
obviously.
communism is bad.
Call of Duty Cold War.
Call of Duty Cold
You
War.
are playing as this character who goes on stealth missions and kills communists in Russia.
Exactly. We could say that. But I'd rather discuss, the kind of like class struggle that Marx and Engels kind of brought up within that manifesto. And because that was made, it was kind of published around this time where we kind of see this big boom in companies, kind of like expanding, monopolizing, right? Just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right?
Forming oligopolies and such.
Exactly, and taking money away from the working class. So you see that, So I think, if you're looking at it, what they describe within that manifesto, of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, and people just getting richer and richer by the day, while other people just get more and more poor. I think that stuff, what happens there, if taken to an extreme and over exaggerated, you end up with rapture. You end up with Dishonored, that old Victorian era England, right? You end up with those places. Yes, they're criticisms, but if you look at it, how they were formed, if you think about how they were formed, it's like what would have happened, right? If brought to an extreme.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have ever happened. I don't think, as much technology as we have today, I don't see any underwater cities.
Yeah.
I don't see any super mansions in England that basically encompass an entire city made of marble, right? I don't see that. Right? It's an over-exaggeration. But again, then we get it back to, it is a criticism, form of art. Ways of expression.
A lot of Dishonored is very 1984 Big Brother-esque.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
spotlights.
Yep. Watching you all the time.
And drones going through the skies.
Yeah, just always watching you. Yep. Guards with weapons at minor places like a drugstore.
Yeah.
It's being under control, right?
Yeah. By the rich.
Yeah, by the rich and the politics, right? Yeah. Okay. So I guess that's our little speech there on the Communist Manifesto. That was definitely interesting. So we're going to move on. Let me get my notes. We're going to move on to... Oh, okay. Jason de Leon, the writer that took himself and... I'm not sure it was his friend or just a colleague, with him to the Mexican and United States border. Okay. And he wrote a book. And this book basically goes into detail about the lives of those people in Mexico who cross that border through a desert, through anywhere. They go anywhere, right? They've moved over time, right? Where they kind of cross has moved just because America has, put a lot of walls, more security in certain areas. So, and one thing that he goes into is how America has kind of made it so that the main place you have to go through is this desert, right? And they're funneling all of these immigrants through there. And their idea is that, this desert is dangerous. People die. You're going to die trying to go through there with nothing. You will not last. So they think that if that danger is present, then by association of danger, people are not going to attempt it. Lo and behold,
People do.
not the case. And you can get into the discussion of whether America is killing people that way. We're not technically shooting anyone, but we're basically sending people to their death who try. Some people make it. You know, they make it. They do make it. But
A lot of people die.
a lot of people die. And I think a lot of numbers are skewed because that desert swallows people whole. They have statistics on how many bodies they find in that desert every day, every year. And, Jason goes in, says that, those numbers, they're most likely incorrect. Because he goes in and he studies how pig carcasses, actually how long they last in that desert. They don't last very long. Spoiler alert. So what's the
Real statistic of how many people die.
well? So what's the idea of how a human body lasts in that environment? So this book, very insightful. The beginning captured me like immediately. He talks about how he's in this town. Forgive me, I forgot the name of the town, and it's kind of one of those border towns. One of the towns that a lot of people who are going to cross that border go to, right? And he describes it as, people really don't care there, right? People really just don't care. It's almost like I don't want to say it's almost like a game, but it's like, these people, these immigrants pass through that town. The people who live in that town are just like, oh, there goes another one, and they forget about them after a day. They don't care whether that person died or not. And that's actually shown when one of the people there, while Jason is, actually there talking to someone, this guy starts walking out into the desert, and he doesn't make it anywhere. And they actually see he dies. He dies in the sand out there, in the dust. And the flies just encompass his body within minutes. And one of the guys who, lives there, one of the locals, says, come tomorrow? No one will remember. And that was the case. Jason went and asked people the day after, and they were like, I don't know anything about it. It's like so common almost, right? It's
so common that people just forget about it.
Yeah, right.
It's a normal thing.
So the whole idea of this is to kind of bring to light, what's going on in the border, because the news really doesn't cover it. You got to do some research your own, and as an American, a lot of Americans just really don't care. It doesn't affect their life. We can say, yeah, it's horrible what's happening at the border, but do we live on the border? We live on the East Coast in New England. We're some of the furthest away from that border, So does it really affect us? No. And the news just isn't going to cover it. Especially now. You don't really see too much of it being covered. You do see it, but not what Jason talks about.
No, it's more of an emphasis on the people after they make it.
Yeah.
And how they're being processed. Obviously, it's a very overburdened system.
Exactly.
Changed.
There's never talked about the bodies, the bodies found in the desert, and the families that those bodies. Yeah, the families of those bodies that think that their son or daughter made it to America, but they didn't.
Somewhere in the desert.
And they're somewhere in the desert, being, just disappearing,
decomposed.
Yeah, It's awful. It's an awful thing. It's a very sad thing. And that book was very sad. Very graphic, too. So, to me, I'm struggling a little bit to relate this to games.
To video games. Well,
because it's such
video
a...
games don't have a subject on it. I mean, There's very little video games that I can even think of that actually take place in Mexico.
Or on the border.
On the border.
For that matter.
Nonetheless.
I mean, there's TV shows.
There's TV shows, obviously. There's things like Breaking Bad, but it's more of a thing of that's drug dealing. It's a different topic.
Exactly.
There's one movie.
Go ahead.
That one movie. I totally forgot. El Norte.
El Norte.
And north about that. A guy and his sister, a Mexican guy and his sister, who want to go to America, and they meet this guy. They call them the Coyotes, the people who
the Coyotes.
Tell them how to get to America. And they go, and obviously they go through a big tunnel, and there's a bunch of rats, and it's terrible conditions. And by the time they make it through, they're exhausted. His sister got sick. Guy's trying to get a job. He gets an opportunity to go somewhere, but he declines it, saying he needs to take care of his sister. He goes home, his sister's dead because she died of sickness. And that's where the movie ends. It's very abrupt. There's no happy ending.
Oh, well, there isn't a happy ending usually to these people.
To those people,
is there?
Obviously, I mean, die in the desert. You get there, you
disappear.
Back.
You disappear.
You disappear.
Yeah.
You can make it, and then you can get sent back.
Exactly. Only to try it again.
Only try it again, and maybe this time you don't make it. So there is not many happy endings. And the same thing for video games. There's not much representation. Same with the news.
I guess you can make that correlation. I mean, I think. Well, I don't know the proper research of how long this has been going on. I don't know how many years. And maybe that plays into the idea that maybe that plays into the reason why there isn't too many video game things about it. It's just too recent.
Yeah, I mean,
or that it's just a difficult topic to really make a game about. I mean, I can't really think of any way on how you would make a video game without offending someone.
Yeah, I mean, you could make it into something like a walking sim where it's like you have to deal with your water and your resources. But even then, that feels sort of offensive.
That's very offensive. No, that's just very offensive right from the bat.
Yeah, you can't really make a game out of that.
Yeah, you can't. No. So let's see. How can we?
I mean, other than something like Call of Duty, where obviously Call of Duty has maps all over the place. They have maps in Mexico, but even then, it's not really showing the struggle.
No, not really.
There's no politics. I mean, obviously, in games like shooters in Call of Duty, you just go in and kill things. There's no politics.
Yeah, well, you can't really have an exploration game that takes place on the Mexican border where you're trying to get from Mexico to the United States.
And obviously, many games don't really take place in deserts to begin with.
I feel like, it's more, it comes down to a thing of respect that I think maybe it's just not been done.
It's just not, no.
Yeah, no, I don't think it can be done in a respectful manner.
It can be done through kind of similar...
You could do it through like an educational game.
Educational game or sort of a game that gives a criticism of us.
Yeah.
Much like, Rapture and Dishonored that we already talked about, where it's an artistic expression and criticism of us on our failures on our part to, fix the system.
But, yeah. I don't really see much of a way to actually, I hate this word, gamify that kind of situation. It's something that just isn't, it doesn't, it just wouldn't feel right making a game out of it. And, I guess that's something that I guess a lot of developers actually have to think about.
Struggle with.
Yeah. Like, you could have an idea that sounds really cool. But when you put when you put pen to paper and you write it out and you start making it, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh.
This isn't right.
This doesn't, they're like, oversight. This is not, no. Civilly correct. And I can't really think of any games that ended like that. Mainly because I don't think a developer would ever explain if they ran into that kind of roadblock. I don't think they'd ever talk about it. That just puts a negative light on them for coming up with the idea in the first place.
I mean, obviously, there's just games that misrepresent and do things like that where it's borderline racist and offensive.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that.
It's just blatant.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that.
We're talking about some border and...
border control and stuff like that. Yeah, the only way I really see a game actually working with that...
being a criticism.
No, it's just being, I think, just a learning game. Learning about what's going on there, and stuff like that. And again, you can say, you know, like a criticism on America's part. And yeah, again, that kind of teaches the kids or people
awareness.
Awareness of this topic, bringing to light this topic that Jason's trying to do through his book and through the multiple like, talks he does and speeches and stuff, you know, which I think is very admirable. You know, he's just out there really trying to, you know, spread the word to people that, you know, it's not like the thing in the back of your mind, right? To a lot of people, I think. And you know, the more you spread the word, again, the more you say it, and the more you do it, there will be change. You know, you can't really stop. So yeah, I think that's where we can kind of end that one. The book is a fantastic book. You should actually read it. You might actually like it. It is a little graphic, especially when it gets to the pigs. But I mean, and there's pictures to kind of go along with it. Very powerful pictures. My visual notes actually. I did my visual notes on inspired by the cover of the book, which is all these backpacks that you find, like literally just like not mounds, but like collections of backpacks from, you know, crossing migrants that, you know, leave stuff behind for people in the desert who are trying to cross as well. And it's just like these collections of backpacks and bags from people. And it's like history almost. It's literally history. And it's a sad history. So that's what I kind of chose to do for my visual notes of that for that one, because it was just such a impactful picture to me. It really sells like a bunch of emotion just from that picture. I don't know what it is. I think the backpacks kind of sell like almost like an innocence almost. And that kind of innocence being swallowed up by it's just sad. It's really sad. It's an awful thing. So yeah, we'll move on from this. All right, so this was part 2, and we'll continue with part 3. So we're picking up with part 3 of this podcast. Kind of just a conversation between, you know, a student and his brother. Again, totally didn't force him to do this. He's doing this by his own free will.
Yeah, out of the goodness of my heart.
Yeah,
definitely wanted to.
Yeah. Hey, make it believable. All right. So we just finished with Jason. Again, fantastic book. And he's just a wonderful person overall. Major respect. So now we're going to get into like, so this next topic kind of revolves around like Oceania. Do you know what that is?
No.
Okay. So brief description. Oceania is like, you know, like the islands like Fiji, and you know how like in the Pacific Ocean, Atlantic, there are like islands.
Yes.
Okay, you ever wondered, like, so what some of those islands, you know, are they a part of anything? Are they their own thing, their own country or anything, right? Well, Oceania is like, it encompasses them, right? Like Fiji, you know?
Yeah.
Not Hawaii. Hawaii, of course, is part of the United States. But you know, islands like that with native people. Different cultures. We're going back to culture for this. I did the visual notes for this as well. There were actually a few quotes that I found like super meaningful. We actually watched a few videos actually, like the B-Town Warriors, the songs from these people. The cool one was Moana. Moana, one of the songs of Moana actually being sang in that native language. I think the song was oh god, was it How Far I'll Go? Yeah. Yeah, that was it. Okay. And not being sang in English, but rather in like the native language of where Moana's from. You know, Maui. And you know, I thought that was actually kind of cool. I actually listened to it twice. It was so good. I have a knack for it. We have a knack for listening to, you know, different language and music. Like when you hear like songs from Peru, you know, you have huayno, right?
Wino music, you have cumbia.
Cumbia, but cumbia is more of a, you know, it's a mixture of Colombian dance. But no, huayno, you know, it's Spanish, but also you have huayno that's incorporated with Quechua, right? And I love listening to that. You know, Grandma always listens to that. We have CDs.
I'm gonna listen to that.
Yeah, whenever she's cooking. Sounds of my childhood. Right there. That's literally what it is. Sounds of my childhood. So I really enjoyed that. So there were 4 readings. There's Fanon, Hau'ofa, Lansing, and Kananui. Very interesting reads. Let me actually open one of them. Okay. Here we go. Perusal's being slow. Okay. So, I'm just trying to jog my memory. So, Fanon's kind of goes into kind of like describing the whole
Situation.
it's a situation in which the people of Oceania, you would think, you know, there are a bunch of islands, right, with people on them.
Yeah.
They would have free, like, transport, like, border, like, freedom to, like, kind of go between themselves, right?
Yeah.
Well, when they were kind of, like, taken over, it brought under more, like, as, you know, jurisdiction by quote-unquote, you know, higher powers, you know, more developed powers. Those borders got restricted, which doesn't make much sense, does it? They were free to go between themselves before. Then all of a sudden it became a border problem, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, that's just something about that just seems very backwards. That whole idea.
It feels like a mother country situation.
Yeah, but it also feels like, you know, how like the Americans came, you know, when the English came to America, the natives,
Yeah.
you know, the Native Americans, you know, we kind of like, we pushed them out. But then also we kind of like created these borders between these different tribes, right? We kind of like stepped in and enforced our own kind of like border rule, right? That's kind of what happened with Oceania.
We're talking like borders over the ocean.
Yeah, kind of.
Which is
pretty much.
weird.
It's kind of weird. Yeah.
I mean, the ocean is very navigable. It's an open body of water.
Exactly, it's an open body of water, and yet there's hard jurisdiction rules on borders. Makes no sense. But you know, just how things were, I guess.
One side goes to the other. I mean, it's...
Yeah, pretty much. So then we can kind of like look at Hau'ofa. I'm sorry if I can't pronounce the name. I'm really bad with names. But this read kind of like goes into like the belittling of the native people on these islands. Because I think it's always been a problem. I think when we discover new people, I guess, new cultures that, you know, we kind of take a first glance at them and our first gut reaction is they're underdeveloped. They're just not smart people. Right?
Yeah.
You look back in history, you're like, yeah, that's happened. You know, history repeats itself. So, you know, we kind of start discussing how, you know, like the people of Oceania, they're kind of like portrayed as like, you know, not very, you know, like they get belittled, you know, and we as people, you know, we kind of hold this kind of moral superiority over them, because they're not as developed as we are. I mean, they're trying to live on these islands, by which by no means, you see them on a map and you're like, wow, that's tiny. But when you're actually standing there, it's pretty good sized. But it's nothing compared to the United States, England, Europe,
Russia.
So of course they're not going to be as developed as we are. But does that really make us like superior to them in any way? In terms of like knowledge or
We're not superior.
no, but that's the whole.
We're not superior people. I mean, they're people.
Yeah. Well, people are people.
People are people.
Yeah.
Nothing makes anybody more superior than the other. So having these people getting almost bullied around by these borders imposed by, I guess, higher powers, in
Yep.
quotations, it's a bullying thing that it shouldn't be happening.
Exactly. That's just about right. So I want to let's try and relate this. When talking about Oceania, the big thing between the readings was like this sense of pride from these cultures that lived on these islands, these groups of islands. There were some quotes and stuff. One of them that stuck out to me was, when he refers to Oceania, I'm blanking on his name, but I'm so bad with names. He describes, he says, Oceania is you describe it as an ocean of, no, islands divided by an ocean, or an ocean filled with islands, right? What sounds bigger and what sounds smaller to you? An ocean of islands sounds bigger, right? And that's the thing. With pride comes like that kind of like sort of, that mentality that, these people, for a while now have just kind of been belittled, but that pride that they have of being, these islands, the Oceania, they, again, they pride themselves in it, right? They're bigger for it, I think. It's a big thing. Hang on, I lost my notes page. My bad. Nope, that's the wrong one. Okay, my computer's not working for me. There we go. Okay. So, we can actually kind of relate this. I mean, the borders and everything, the boundaries that are set between these islands because of us, it almost can actually kind of relate back to like Jason in a way, with the border between Mexico and the United States. There should, to a lot of people, it feels like there should be just free passage. You should be able to go from one to the next, right, without having so much trouble. But
it kind of leaves you feeling isolated.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're kind of like isolating these people
to one island. Otherwise, you have a lot of trouble getting to another one. And obviously, if people want to branch out. I mean, I don't know the extent of these people. I don't know if they have boats. I don't know if they travel.
So, getting more into how, again, I would like to relate this to games
in some fashion.
My major. Let's stick with borders. Borders is something that, because it just doesn't make sense in this in this context of Oceania. These how they set borders for these people. I mean, in reality, yeah. I think I'm just trying to gather my thoughts here.
I guess it's part of it could be in order to relate this to games. I mean, a part of it could be on this broad level of countries, bigger powers, bullying smaller things and making people feel as if they are inferior, sort of. In this, it kind of certainly looks that way.
We could talk about, like, I mean, you can talk about, well, we can talk about, like one aspect of this. I feel like, which I'm trying not to go in this direction, but I mean, I can say it again, using that kind of pride that these people have, and bringing it forth. Like Moana was a great thing, right? Fantastic movie, right? Mm-hmm. And teaches kids a lot.
Yes.
Video games can do the same thing.
Yes.
And the reason I don't want to go down this path is because we've already discussed it. How, in this instance, you would use games in my major. Like me making a game to kind of emphasize the strength of these people. Like incorporate them and make them feel included, right? And I mean. Like, yes, there are characters in video games that, are from these islands. Like, again, like Hawaii, right? We have Gibraltar from Apex, right? Yes. He's traditional Hawaiian. He's Hawaiian, right? And a lot of his, costumes and everything in game that you can change into kind of represent and
culture.
Yeah, the culture. That he's from. And also, fun fact, he's actually gay, so it's another thing. But, that's just another inclusive thing that I thought was actually kind of cool with Apex. When they released the whole, story and everything, and they were like, oh, Gibraltar, he has a boyfriend and everything. And
it's not pushed in your face.
No, it's not pushed in your face. No, it's just mentioned. I think, it's like, I think that's a good thing. Inclusiveness, yeah, exactly. But we're getting off topic. I can go in that kind of direction,
more
but
representation of these people who are being bullied by this system. But I
don't know. I can't think of a game that represents that. But I mean,
I would say a good. It feels like a sort of theme, kind of. I mean, back in high school, I remember we learned about mother countries and how mother countries could kind of impose their will on other countries, and that included borders. That included all sorts of things, and it's similarly to what's happening here. I mean, they're not taking resources. They're not.
Well, they are. I mean, look at
Fiji.
Look at Fiji. The people of Fiji aren't allowed to actually have the water that Fiji. The water. You've seen Fiji water. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so if it is a bit of that situation, I guess a game that is sort of in that theme would actually be Titanfall, in the sense of.
That's a good.
Titanfall.
Okay,
in the sense that you have these people who, and actually the first game, it's made to look like the militia is the bad guys, right?
From how you play it.
From how you play it, because the story wasn't very that good in the first game. But in the second game, it's made very clear that what's happening in that game, in a similar theme, of the militia live on this planet. What was this planet called?
Oh. Again, I'm bad with names. Whatever. They live on a planet.
It's called the...
It's not
the
Earth.
Frontier. They call it the Frontier.
Yeah.
They call it the Frontier.
Oh, yeah.
It's basically humans. They live on this planet, the Frontier, and obviously, and there's this big corporation.
I think it was the ICD.
I see.
IDC.
I don't care.
My bad.
Whatever.
UNC? No, that's Halo.
UNC.
No, that's Halo.
It's very similar. We could call it the UNC for now.
Yeah, we'll call it the UNC.
It's very similar. It's 3 letters. But it's like a company, and these people fight for this company.
The IMC. IMC.
Literally the same thing.
We got it.
IMC. The IMC is this corporation is people who came to the Frontier to sort of drain its supplies, so kind of destroying the planet. Basically, and these people who kind of, I mean, the game fights back. I mean, the militia fights back, and I guess.
Well, yeah, I think what you're trying to explain here is
it's a similar theme of like this mother country kind of bullying around these people as if they're better. as
Almost,
if they
yeah.
have control, which they don't.
Without any kind of like, without any like reason. I mean, not that there's no reason. The reasoning is they want the materials and they want the resources that these islands hold, but they're not respecting
They're not respecting
these people at all.
I mean, in the opening monologue of Jack Cooper saying that they're destroying our homes, they're taking our things and killing us when we try to resist.
Exactly. That's for Titanfall.
Titanfall.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I do like that parallel. And that does show like almost like a criticism almost.
Again, it's a lot of games. A very big theme with games. A lot of them are criticisms of obviously
things.
what the idea of mother countries bullying other things is still a thing today, but it was way more prevalent back then. In the times when we were still expanding, so around the time British Empire expanding, and obviously there was a mother country, our mother country, America's mother country used to be England until we went independent. So it's more of a criticism on that more than what's happening right now, but it's the same similar concept.
Sure, but okay, so yeah. Definitely Titanfall. I didn't actually think about that off the top of my head. I'm glad you brought that up. Because the parallels drawn there are actually pretty big. And, a big thing with Oceania is in the writings, you have people, you have these writings that, the readings that talk about why it's happening in the first place to these islands, how, they have resource and everything that we want, and we rely on them after the Second World War and everything. But we just kind of like move in and impose our will and say, yeah, we're just going to do this.
And
it's final. Yeah, it's final. I mean,
there's nothing you can really
there's
do.
nothing you really can do about it. I mean, it's the United States going up against this little quotations island that has maybe a few hundred thousand.
It's very bullying.
It's bullying. And then on top of that, you have people who are belittling these people. These cultures and natives, they're getting bullied for what, being underdeveloped and everything, on top of what we're doing, and we're taking their things and just for our own personal gain and stuff like that. I mean, it's just an overall awful situation. And that is perfectly portrayed in Titanfall's story.
Obviously, these people.
You have the frontier that is home to these people that have been building it up for, I think they said like for a few hundred years now. They've been building up the frontier and making it a home for people, because I think in Titanfall's universe, Earth was destroyed. We kind of drained it. We drained it of all of its resources.
And there were wars in the Divide, and
and so everyone moved out.
Settled on the frontier, and then other places try to come take the frontier stuff.
Exactly, because the frontier has resources.
Yeah.
And the IMC just basically butts their nose in and just comes in with all these spacecraft and basically just tell the people down below, we're literally just going to take everything, and if you resist, we'll kill you. That's much more of an extreme than what happened in Oceania, but what's happening in Oceania, I should say. But there is that comparison there, and it's a big one actually. And there's a lot of, and it's awful because before this class, I actually didn't know about Oceania.
No,
I had no clue. I had no clue until I did the readings. I was like, what is Oceania? What is that? And, then you start to learn about all these different cultures that exist in the ocean. And you're like, wow, wait, the ocean is actually much richer in culture than you would actually think.
Yeah.
Right? The different people that live out there and what they, what they eat and how they live their lives is so different to us. And it only makes sense because they're like this island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and it's interesting to see like their culture and what they worship and stuff like that. I had no clue. I literally had no clue. That's something I never learned in high school, which is kind of odd to me. You know,
Maybe this
it
one
felt weird because I was just like, oh,
This
well,
has
in
been
high school I
happening.
learned about what America. I even learned about Canada, Mexico, South America to an extent. We learned a lot about Europe, Russia, Asia. You know, like stuff. We learn about these continents and all these countries and everything.
Nobody learns about the
But
small
no,
island off.
exactly no one. Yeah, it's almost like no one cares about this little island off the coast of,
Wherever, you know?
wherever that has all these resources that we kind of just are draining in the background. Like no one actually
Yeah,
cares.
they're being abused without, their sort of struggles being publicized.
Exactly.
So, yes, and it's abuse and it is bullying.
It is bullying. But yeah, I just found that very.
there's
I
not
found that
any-
very awe shocking. I don't know. It was very weird to me.
In order to relate it to games, obviously related to Titanfall, there's actually not many other games with those sort of themes. Titanfall
Yeah.
was a big one that I thought of.
I know. I'm trying to think. In the back of my mind, while you're talking, I was trying to think of any other game.
I guess another thing is, Titanfall, good on them for. Obviously, they probably didn't think about Oceania when doing that.
No, but I think if you were to explain it to anyone, like the first gut reaction in morality, I think is, wow, that's awful, right? Why would they be doing that? Right?
I mean, obviously, the point of the game itself is when you hear about this, it's like, oh, this is terrible. Oh my god, I want to fight with the militia. I want
Exactly.
to make this right, but then, and you don't hear about that in news, but when you hear about it in real life, it's like, oh, that's terrible.
Well, yeah, there's that sense of morality.
Yeah.
There's a sense of morality. There's no morality in what's happening over there.
Yes.
You know, it's like, okay, like when I learned about it, I was just kind of blown away. But that's just me. I mean, yeah, and I think we discussed this actually a little bit in class. That who learned about Oceania in high school or anywhere before that? Who read a book about it? Like I've never seen a book about it. I've never seen a YouTube video about it. I've never seen a documentary about it. Even it seems like it's such a big thing. Oceania is big, right? Oceania. If you were to look at it, if you were to look up what Oceania is, right? I could actually get you a photo. Let me get you a photo. Oh yeah, you can look it up. Look it up. Do it really quickly. But it's a big thing, and it feels so weird not knowing, just knowing that I went through my
Like this?
yeah. Look at the islands that are incorporated in it.
There's a lot.
Exactly.
Quite a lot.
That's a lot of islands. The kind of
Johnston.
But that entire area is reduced down by people, belittled by people, into just saying it. Yeah, it's just it's the ocean with some islands in it. Doesn't that sound so degrading?
Yeah, it's almost like since they're not a big.
They're not a big
of land. It's
yeah.
Like they're not important.
They're not important. Exactly.
And that includes the people on it. It's that's pretty
Exactly.
ignorant.
It's very ignorant. It is very ignorant. And I'm I was very ignorant to it before this class.
Well, we were never taught.
Well, exactly. I was never taught it,
never
but
exposed to that.
exactly. But again, ignorance, it goes a long way. But yeah, I just wanted to end it on that. I thought it was really weird that I had never heard of it, even in high school. Like, I don't know. I could pose the question to some of my friends and ask them if they knew about it.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't.
They probably wouldn't. We all went to the same school. I don't know whether that's. I guess that can be a criticism on the schooling system.
Maybe perhaps it needs to be more publicized of what's happening to those people.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah,
And
I would think so. I mean, like the cultures there are just as important as any culture around the world, and yet just because they're small islands, again, they're just thought of not being important. That's just weird. That's weird to me, and it doesn't scream inclusiveness at all in today's society at all.
It's another thing that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, and brought up, and I think these people definitely do deserve the respect that they should have gotten, should have been having this entire time.
It's a big issue that still hasn't been fixed. I mean, it's surprising.
Well, I think it's being fixed now, but it was definitely an issue, and it still is today. I'm trying to word this great, but yeah. Yeah. All right, we'll stop there. We've gone on a while about this one. So the last part that we're going to discuss for this podcast. Yes. We've made it to the end. It's been interesting though, right?
The final hurdle.
The final hurdle. Okay, yeah. So this last one is a bit. It's a very touchy subject, and it's a very recent subject. It's still going on today. It's more or less just we're going to be talking about like violence against women and children, and I mean there is violence against men. It goes in every which way for partners, right? It's violence, right?
Yeah.
A relationship violence.
Relationship violence.
Yeah. And this was definitely a very touchy subject because, while things like Oceania and their cultures aren't very publicized and everything, you do see a lot of this in the news. Maybe not so much anymore. I mean, as I've gotten older, as we have gotten older, I don't know. Maybe it's just I haven't paid too much attention to the news. I don't really turn on the TV and watch Fox or CNN or BBC, like for hours. I'm either doing work or taking care of the house or something like that. But I do know about this because this is a topic that is very much needing attention.
Yeah.
Always needing attention. It can never stop. This needs addressing all the time. It's not constantly in the news, but I think it's definitely something that
the recurring issue.
I guess so.
It's a recurring, a constant.
Yeah,
issue
almost.
that seems to never really.
It's getting better.
I mean, it does get better, but it hasn't seen massive improvement.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. So, I'm trying to see which reading do I want to pick here. This also goes. A part of this does go into. Some of this reading does go into like sexuality and stuff. I don't think we're going to focus too much on that. That was with I think Wisemantel with the mote sex pots. It's like pottery from these like ancient Andes culture people, where they made pottery that depicted like sex acts, stuff like that. We really won't go into that too much. While it is super interesting, and we do have background
information.
Not background information, but like our family being from Peru and everything. We have we've gone. I'm pretty sure when we were in Cusco, we saw some of those pots in a museum. You remember when we went to that museum that was like next to that church in Cusco?
Was that the one where there was that painting that looked like the loading screen in Destiny?
Yeah.
I do remember seeing a lot of pots and.
I don't know whether they were those specific
ones, but
sex pots, but
it's probably Incan.
Well, I think actually a lot of Inca culture is you see a lot of Inca culture like inspired by this initial culture. I mean, like the pictures and stuff that they show, and some of the background research I did because I was just super curious. It is, but I don't want to talk about that too much. Because that's just that's that. But and we can go on for days about Peru, but I do want to talk about like here. Let me open this one up. This was Lack. I'm sorry. I picked the wrong person. Okay, yeah. This one. Yeah, this was it. So this was a writing called No Way Out. It's about divorce related domestic violence in Israel. Okay. And it's definitely a tough read. I had a tough time reading it. Not because it's hard reading, but just the subject matter. It's
hard to read.
It's just hard to read. I'm actually going to split this into two. I know we're only supposed to have two subjects. There's one other subject that I want to discuss that I will relate into my major. I just thought, I wanted to actually discuss this, though, a little bit first. So this reading goes into that whole, violence against women in Israel. And I don't know, I just kind of wanted to talk about it. It's almost like we discussed in class. It's like these males that like use intimidation tactics to kind of keep their wives from leaving them. Right? One of the examples we went over was like when a wife is, like complaining about to her husband about how he treats her or anything like that, and the husband maybe goes and starts cleaning his gun, or the husband goes and starts sharpening his knives while she's talking. It's kind of like, yeah, you see what that is not, you can't see it, of course, person who's listening, professor. My brother's face just said it all. Yeah, right? You think about it. Think about it. These intimidation tactics, right? Well, we're not married. I haven't been there. I haven't gotten there yet, but
I haven't seen anything like that.
Exactly.
So,
Wow.
So it just seems weird to me because I'm imagining. It's just wow.
Yeah.
Something that I wouldn't have imagined.
Well, not that I don't think it's something that you wouldn't have imagined, but it's just to like this most extreme, that these people, that these males go to. The violence goes into, I think I don't want to say like every family has this. Okay, this is just coming from personal. But I do know a few of our aunts and stuff who have been abused by our uncles, former uncles, because, they get divorced. And thankfully, nothing has happened after the divorce to any of our aunts, right? The divorce is probably the greatest thing that could actually happen for them. It ends all of that. They get that negative leech off their back, right? This leech that just spews negativity in their life off their back. It's great. And you would think that in this area, in Israel, that divorce would be the greatest thing for women, right? Their husbands beat them, the word battered came up a lot in class, and how people were actually very uncomfortable with the word. Personally, I wasn't very uncomfortable with the word. I understand why people are. It's definitely not a word that's nice, and it definitely paints a picture, but I'm going to use it here in this context just to kind of, I just want to use it to explain. You would think that these, women that are battered in these places like Israel, divorce would be the greatest thing. No. In all reality, divorce is like some of the scariest stuff these women can go through, which is like just so mind-blowing to me. I don't know about you. Like, you would think, divorce, you get away from that person, right?
Yes.
And now all of a sudden you're better off, right?
Yeah.
But it's actually quite the opposite, because these women just feel more in danger,
unsafe.
especially, unsafe coming up to divorce and after divorce. This reading kind of goes into how leading up to divorce, women can actually just can be beaten. They go through so much violence And that's just leading up to it. And after the divorce has gone through and everything, if they have kids, this monster that did this to them, there are certain rights to be had where he gets to see his kids. I mean, I'm no mother, but, oh my God, like, I can't even imagine. And there is an example within this reading, where a father got to see his kids, and because of the divorce that he had gone through, he decided to burn his kids alive and then kill himself. Yeah, the extremes that are gone to because of this stuff. It's insane. And something that, I don't know, it just, it really,
Very dark.
yeah, exactly. I don't know, I just wanted to discuss that. I wanted to share that with you because I feel like that's something important to share.
I know nothing about it. I knew nothing about it before you told me about it.
Well, I guess not. This is a good learning thing for you. Maybe you can take this class in the future. You have a little heads up. But yeah, something I wanted. But okay, so we're gonna switch paces into another reading that kind of goes into something that I can actually relate really well into the gaming industry and my major of game design, which is disability.
Yeah.
Disability plagues, well, not plagues, but there are a lot of people with disability nowadays, depending on what disability it is, right? You have people who are physically disabled, and you have people who are mentally disabled. They're mentally handicapped, right? So you have both areas, mental and physical. And the article that I'm referring to was an article written by, hang on, my notes. It reset on me. Hang on, I gotta flip through the pages. Yeah, by Staples. Not the company, but Staples. This article was called Medical Anthropology Quarterly. Oh, I'm sorry. Culture and Carelessness. Carelessness. That's the big word. Carelessness. There's a big stigma. And it's very hard to debate that. There's a big stigma about people with disabilities. And I think you and I can both agree, because going through high school and everything, there's bullying, of course, and we have our dear friend, Tucker, who lives with autism and anxiety. And he was definitely bullied in high school,
Yes.
right? You would say that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's something that, as a kid, as a kid, you see it happening, and you have no power to it. I mean,
You
but
it's like you have this sort of choice whether you stand up and say something about it or you don't, and you roll with the punches. And I guess a lot of kids did that.
yeah. We're still friends with Tucker today. We still hang out with him, play Xbox with him. Always a good time. But disability is something that I feel like it's a lot of people make assumptions about it these days, because everyone thinks they're the smartest person in the world when they read an article or something about it, and they only read the first paragraph and they think they're Albert Einstein.
Yeah.
And then they regurgitate that information on someone who maybe has a child with a disability. That's not helpful at all. And I can say from it, I can say not from experience, but I can say from just a position of, like having a friend who has autism and such. If I had a child that had autism, I really wouldn't want someone coming to me and explaining to me how I should treat my, autistic child, or how an autistic child functions. I don't want someone coming up to me and telling me that. I think a lot of people do that because they're trying to sympathize, but really there shouldn't be any. You shouldn't be trying to give sympathy rather than, the big thing in this reading. That I took away from it was support. Support over sympathy. Sympathy is something you give if someone passes away in someone's life, right? You give sympathy, right? But it almost feels insulting.
Yeah, it's insulting. I'm sorry.
Your child is autistic, or your child is mentally handicapped, or your child is physically handicapped.
That
right?
Sounds terrible.
It sounds terrible. But yet so many people, yeah, exactly. But so many people do it.
Yeah.
Why?
It's ignorance.
There you go. That's a big thing. Ignorance. Yeah, it's just these people who read an article or they see something on, TV with Jimmy Kimmel or something like that, and they're immediately like, I'm experts on this knowledge, and they try to give sympathy and try to sympathize with the person who has an actually disabled child or a disabled person in their life, and they just come out looking like a jerk. Yeah, right. So I think again, support, right? Support is the biggest thing. You don't sympathize with the parent, you don't sympathize with the family or the person. You give them support, because at the end of the day, they're not any less human than me or you or anyone else around us.
It's not like...
Yeah, they're not a different species.
It's not like they're dead or something.
Yeah, they are...
It's a person.
They're a person, Tucker's a person. I respect him equally as anyone else. He's my friend. And I respect him as a person. And I understand that sometimes he can use some help and such in certain situations, like because he's autistic, he doesn't sometimes get some of the little jokes that we say, sometimes we'll be joking around with him and he'll think that we're serious, and we're like, oh no, no, the joke is, and once we explain it to him, then he's just like, oh, okay, and then he goes along with it, and he's fine. It's just giving that support to the people who need it is the biggest thing. And when I talk about support, I want to kind of transition this over into gaming for disability. That's an actual thing that goes on in the gaming industry. One of the biggest contributors is Bungie, the studio that famously created Halo originally, and is now working on a multi-game franchise called Destiny. They are one of the biggest contributors to this. They started their Bungie Foundation that not only helps foster kids with cancer and stuff like that, it also goes towards the gaming for disability. And they make custom controllers for kids who are physically handicapped to be able to play games.
Yeah.
They custom build these controllers so that kids with disabilities, with maybe their arm or some kind of disability, with coordination or anything, they can actually use the controller effectively and play games that they otherwise, just as good as anyone else can, that they otherwise wouldn't be able to with a regular controller, on a regular Xbox, PlayStation, or a mouse and keyboard,
which is made just two hands.
Exactly.
I mean, obviously, there's kids out there who maybe don't use their arms.
No, there are controllers that are controlled by someone's feet. They're controlled by the moving of someone's shoulder, right?
Yeah.
They're controlled by head tilts, and they have a joystick that they use with their mouth.
Yeah, it's things.
It's things like that, custom made, custom tailored for specific people with specific disabilities, right? And I always found that to be like such a just
Very
a
wholesome.
cool thing. Not very wholesome, and just super cool coming from the gaming industry, because you don't see a lot of companies like Treyarch, EA. I'm going to start calling people out. Bethesda, Blizzard. You don't see companies, big mega corporation companies, big names like what I just named. They don't do anything about that. If you can't use a controller to play the game, you can't play the game. But here's this indie studio who branched off from being part of that AAA, corporate agenda. They moved on to being their own self-publisher, and they've done all of this great stuff. Yeah. And they've actually gotten more studios to kind of, go along with them.
Yeah, obviously it became a wave, and now everybody feels like they have to do it. Otherwise, they look bad.
Well, yeah, in a way. But you don't see Blizzard or anyone making those controllers,
There's
do
still
you?
a lot of companies who still don't do it.
Exactly. Or they don't publicize it as much as they should. Bungie does announcements. I get emails. They do it on their website. They hold events and everything. Bungie's great. They are the number one studio company that advocates for this stuff. And I can fully appreciate and respect that. And I do, I have donated to them. The Bungie Foundation for Life, I donated to them. Give them $35. Whenever it comes around, I try to give them some money, and they do give me some rewards for in-game stuff for Destiny and everything, which is cool. But, I mean, I'm doing it for them, and I the amount of money they raise through those fundraisers and those events is crazy, and that all that money just goes towards those kids. And I think it's something
It's great.
in the gaming industry, especially now at Quinnipiac, I remember the first thing we did when I got into the game program was we used Magpies to make games, which is this circuit board that uses electrical currents that can go to different things to do different functions, right? So I made a game with a Magpie that connected to tinfoil balls, and you played Frogger with it. And that kind of leads into making specific controllers, right? That's the first thing I thought of. I was like, so this is kind of like how it works, right? You're taking these functions, you're making a controller custom, but making it not a traditional controller setup,
like joystick and button.
Exactly. Yeah. And a little criticism coming from me on Quinnipiac's part. I wish there were some more classes to do that kind of stuff, to explore that kind of stuff that there aren't. That's the only intro to game design is where you get to do that. And that's the only part. I mean, after that, you're strictly thrown into using PC, Unity, mouse and keyboard, and a little bit of VR. But kids with disabilities, they can't use VR. Some of them can't, So, again, making controllers that can allow them to do so.
It's a great thing.
It's a great thing. And it's a great field to kind of look into. I mean, I've seen a few, actually, positions while I'm, on LinkedIn and stuff, looking for programmers and stuff and engineers. Bungie's actually hiring still engineers to actually get these controllers into the hands of kids so that they can play games. And that's just such a wonderful thing. And it really emphasizes that sort of, don't give sympathy, rather give your support to these families and these kids. Bungie wants to support these kids and allow them to have fun. And I think that's just one of the most beautiful things to come from the gaming industry as a whole, not including big AAA studios. I mean, Bungie was a part of that at one point, but they're actually...
So I said they're better.
I think they're better off by themselves because they're doing much more by themselves than they could have done with Blizzard and Activision. They were tightrope, just like strapped in Activision and Blizzard. And when they branched off, it's almost like some like magic.
All that passion.
All that passion just came out. It flourished. The company just grew, and it was great.
Yeah, it suddenly wasn't about money. It was about
exactly. It's certain. Nowadays it's more about the money. It's all about the consumer, right? how much money can we leech out of our players' pockets?
It's better.
You
When
know?
it's better
But-
when it's a system about how much fun can you give to your audience.
Exactly.
and
And
to
as-
people making it.
And I think relating this again to my major as a game designer, my main focus is not at the end of the day, how much money am I going to make from this game? Because at the end of the day, if someone is having fun with my game, I'm happy.
That's
That's
a part of it.
my
Yeah,
that's my dream.
I mean, after all, video games are a part of the entertainment industry. So what's a game if it can't entertain? That's the main part of it.
I mean,
right?
look at FIFA. Look at any sports game
Well,
made by
yeah,
EA.
well, copy and paste.
Look, yeah, it's copy and paste, and they make you pay $60 every year to get the new version. And if you don't get the new version, you're gonna fall behind. Tell me, is that not more money focused?
Yeah, it is.
Exactly.
Focus.
You know, and I don't see EA ever acknowledging, making controllers for disabled kids so that they can play FIFA. Never. I don't see it. But this indie studio now, with a lot of money, Bungie, does it on their own. And now they have actual supporting other studios doing it as well with them. Small indie studios from around the United States, helping them with that.
Yeah, how awesome is that?
Yeah. They're growing a community to help. And again, as a game designer, that's like the number one thing. You want your player to have fun. And if your player can't have fun because they can't play your game,
Them.
you should support them and give them that option to play your game. Make the functionality. Think of it when you're making it, One of the things now with games that's just been incorporated is like colorblind modes and stuff for people with color blindness.
Every game has that nowadays.
Yeah, every game has that nowadays. It's a step in the right direction, You're given the option, because colors and UI within games is important, and people with color blindness couldn't really, get some of that sometimes. And having those different colorblind modes for games, awesome addition. It's an awesome addition. But that's like the biggest thing. Can you think of any other? No, right?
No.
No. Yeah, that's the biggest thing since colorblind mode. So, yeah. So I think that's where we'll end it. Yeah, definitely, helping disabled kids, big thing in the gaming industry, at least from Bungie's part and all those little studios that help. Great thing. So I just want to kind of end this off. It's been a great semester. This class is definitely a lot of fun to take. The readings were great. I enjoyed the music. I really enjoyed the music, actually. And I definitely learned a lot. It's definitely been very eye-opening. And everything that we kind of discussed in this podcast, this little discussion that we had towards my major, I definitely will take with me into my professional career. Because at the end of the day, it just makes me and anyone else who has the same knowledge and thinks the same, has the same ideas of this kind of stuff, like me, we're better game designers for it,
Considerate creator.
Exactly. Being a considerate creator. Yeah, that's a good word for it. That's good for it. A good way to say it. Phrase it. Sorry, my mind is going. So yeah, definitely, I will definitely take that with me. It's been a big learning experience, and I've definitely learned a lot more stuff that I'm surprised I just never really learned about in high school. It's an odd thing, but I'm glad I got to learn it at least at some point. So, thank you, Professor. It's been a great semester. I appreciate the kindness. And, yeah, that's about it. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. Ethan, like to say bye?
Bye.
Yeah, that's his bye. We'll see ya.